So Peter, I guess the last thing that anyone wants is to go to court. So can you step us through some of the things that people would want to consider to avoid this whole legal process in the end?
Okay. Right at the very start, without going into documentation, etc., what I find with a lot of disputes, and even when I'm mediating or a dispute referee on a matter, is that it is amazing the lack of communication between the parties. And a lot of the mediations I get involved in, when it's over, the owners and the builder shake hands and they're the best of mates and they wonder how they ever got there. So communication is very, very important. When you have a problem, you need to speak to someone about it. You need to speak to them carefully. Some people will abuse the builder and the builder will abuse the people. Worst thing you can do, you need to take that back and just talk rationally and look at the documents. If you've got proper documents in the first instance, you need to make sure that when you look for a builder, that you do a bit of homework. Go around and have a look at some of his jobs, and have a look at the jobs that are under construction. It's always nice to see a finished house, but you know, a finished house has got landscape, got carpets in, etc., etc., and the worst house can still look the best. But if you have a look at a house under construction, you know, if the site's an absolute mess and rubbish lying everywhere, and you yourself don't feel easy about it, well then don't sign with that builder. That's a start. Secondly, make sure that when you do sign with the builder, all the documentation is there in place, and only use documents that are sanctioned by people like the Housing Industry Association, the Master Builders Association, the Archie Centre. Those documents have been looked at by the Office of Business and Consumer Affairs, and they are there to protect both the owner and the builder. Make sure you read the documents. The amount of people that I actually meet that don't know what's in those documents, and do you know, if you buy a car, you read everything. You get an inspection, you do the lot, and a car might cost you $30,000, $20,000, $50,000. But when you go and buy a house for $200,000, $300,000, people seem to miss that. And there's too many documents to read. You're entitled to take those documents home and read them, not just blatantly go out and sign them. Verbal agreements, absolutely no-no, a big no-no. A friendship develops between the owner and the builder at the contract signing stage. All right, it's a terrible thing to say, but I always liken it to a marriage. People get married because they love each other, and builders and owners, they sign contracts because they get on, they like each other. But when there's a dispute on, the parties are so far apart that when it goes to court, the magistrates actually and the judges actually draw straws on whether they take a divorce case or they take a building dispute. They're just as bad as each other. So documentation, very important. Verbal contracts, big no-no. Always have a variation. If the builder won't draw one up, write to him, and don't let any work variations be started or commenced until you know, number one, what the price is, and number two, you have a variation signed which tells you what the price is. You're better off paying a little bit more if the builder just thinks of a number and gives it to you. Better off paying a little bit more or saying no than going ahead with it and then finding out it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more than what you thought, and you've got to fight in a court of law and you lose the money anyway. The other thing is also, one of the arguments that I see a lot is people start putting a lot of variations in place, and they think it's only $100, it doesn't matter, but they forget that 20 variations at $100 is a lot more. So people need to budget. That causes a lot of problems when people run out of money, and money, you know, really causes problems. When you're budgeting, you should budget for, at least in your contract, 2.5% to 5% for variations. If you don't spend it, great. All right? Your prime cost items. I see a lot of arguments with prime cost items. Prime cost item is where a provincial sum that the builder puts in because you haven't selected something. For example, your stove. You haven't selected the stove, so he says it's worth $700. We'll prime cost it. We'll adjust it when we get when you've selected, and you pay the difference. When the difference is another $700, everybody gets upset. You're better off going in, selecting it, and it's fixed price. If you want to change it, provided the builder hasn't purchased it or installed it, you still have an opportunity to do that later with a variation. But prime cost items, I've seen contracts with 30 prime cost items on them, and it really causes some problems. So proper documentation is very important. Sign every bit of documentation you've got. Make sure it's all signed by the builder and the owner. The other thing when you're looking for a builder, you need to have a look at the resources of the builder. Has he got too much work on? Time is another matter that really has a real big problem. When you think you're going to get the house finished in 6 months and it takes a year and a half. A lot of times that's caused by, yes, the economy. I mean, when they pour money into the economy, then suddenly we have a shortage of trades and materials, and builders find it very hard to get enough trades to do the work. But you need to make sure that the builder's got resources. And how do you find that out? You ask, you look around, you have a look and see if the building looks like it's been there for 12 months, and you can tell by the timbers if they're all starting to go grey, etc. So you try to find out what the builder's resources are. A small builder won't have as many resources as a large builder, but then again, a large builder can have just the same problem. If he's got too much work, then his resources are stretched, and he has jobs sitting out there as well. So it's very important to make sure that the builder can do the job.
What about supervisors?
Supervision. Over the years, supervision has, in my opinion, the quality of some of the supervisors has gone downhill. It's different than when I was a young lad as a supervisor. We had a thing called the Building Act. You had no, you worked to the Building Act. You described what you had to do. We built with timber and bricks and mortar, and that was it. Now we have so many alternative types of construction that and there's a myriad of documentation. When in my 20s, a builder's documentation would go in the middle of the folder, and you'd be able to carry it fairly well. Now when you sign up with a builder, you've got a lever arch folder, and sometimes two. The supervisors, to know all of that, it's a very difficult task. The problem is some of the supervisors have too much work to look at, so they don't get time to actually inspect the work properly, and that's a real big problem in the industry. Supervisors relying on trades. The old days of the 5-year trades are gone. Tradesmen now do about a 6-month course and then do learning as they go. And what happens there is that the trades are not as particular as they should. Some of them are very good. There's some very good trades out there. But on the average, the supervisors who are relying on the trades have problems. So good supervision is essentially important. And in fact, if you think about it, the work that I do, and I've been doing since '89 and making a very good living out of it, I'm actually supervising. I'm supervising the supervisors. And we have a couple of builders, one of them a large project builder, that a chap that works for me, he oversees their work. We do 4 inspections on every one of their jobs for them, and the owners get a copy of those reports. And so what we're in fact doing is supervising the supervisors. And if the supervisors were able to do their job properly, that wouldn't happen. Sure. I wouldn't have a job.
Sure. I've got a friend that he's built a few houses with the same building company, but he's had different supervisors, and the difference between the projects, he said, was just incredible. I think 2 of the houses that he built with one particular supervisor went through without a problem. He had another 2 houses he was building with another supervisor that was mayhem, and this was the same building company.
Yeah. I did a large inspection with a wall and roof frame and upper floor on the weekend, and the supervisor actually rolled up on site, driving past, saw me there, and he knew I was going to be there, and we went over it, and he was surprised at what I found when I went through the documents on the layouts, the approved layouts, at what didn't comply. Bracing missing, bracing put in the wrong place, tie downs not there, etc. And he said to me, "How come you can find all of this, Peter?" And I said, "I have a format. I go through it, I tick everything off, and that's your job. That's what you should be doing." And his answer was, "I don't have the time to do that." So it's, I think training of supervisors, and I actually have been training supervisors for a lot of years with the HIA, the importance of them having checklists and going over the work and checking it off. I mean, if you fly a plane, before you take off, you have a checklist. Okay. And doctors have checklists. Nearly every profession, you get a car built, they have checklists. They have people doing quality control, and that's what it is. It's quality control. A lot of builders have quality control in their office, but not on the site, and that's a real pity.
And how much experience do you need to be a supervisor, to become a supervisor? How many years of study or being on the job?
Oh heavens! I think that it's an ongoing thing. Of course, it helps to be a tradesman for a start. A carpenter tradesman is one of the better ones, mainly because you're taught to build the whole house virtually, and so you get a touch of everything. But look, I've seen good supervisors that are not tradesmen, not ex-tradesmen. You've got to be a good organiser. If you can't organise yourself, you just can't be a good supervisor. Regardless of your knowledge, you must be organised, because there's a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, and half a supervisor's time is driving around.
Okay. If I decided today to become a supervisor, how quickly could I get the license, I guess, to become a supervisor?
You'd have to do a course, either at the MBA or the HIA, one of the accredited courses, and that would take you somewhere 6 months part-time, maybe 12. You would have to nowadays do a management course as well, in regards to managing money.
Yeah.
And then you would get like a probationary license. Your license would be restricted. In regards to, gee, if I could go back perhaps myself, when I started supervising, I had no experience as a supervisor, as a carpenter obviously, and I just pushed my way into a supervisor's job. The way I taught myself was to say to myself, well, this is my building, these are my buildings, and I'll control them. These are my subcontractors, and I'll control them. And that's the way I taught myself. And then to get to know the building rules is not an easy task. I mean, you need to do a course that will take you a year at least to get to know the building rules. And it's not that you know every rule that's in the book. They're pretty thick books. There's a lot in there, and even I've been involved in helping to write them. I just don't know it all. But what the trick is to know how to read them and where to get your information from.
Sure.
There's a pecking order in the industry of all of your building rules, and what comes first and what comes last, and you need to know that pecking order as well. So it's an ongoing thing. You've got to be a good organiser. You've got to be alert and be able to look at things. I mean, even when you're alert, you can walk past something 3 times and not see it.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of having a checklist, and a supervisor has a checklist, does his courses, gets to know the building rules, and you've got to keep up to date with them. Pretty soon you get pretty good at it. One thing you can't do is fly by the seat of your pants. You do that, it's fraught with disaster. And the problem with the building industry is that, you know, you can leave out a $40 item such as viscourse, and it will cause a problem. It will cost you thousands of dollars to fix.
So would the take-home message be that it's not just the builder that you're looking for, but it's also the quality of supervisor that's going to come with it?
Yes, definitely. If the supervisor's looking after 60 houses, he can't supervise it.
Particularly if it's all over the metropolitan area.
Well, you know, I know some companies who are engaging supervisors that run from Noongar to Gawler, and you know, you spend all your day in the car, all your day on the phone, and you don't supervise. All you are is a gopher. And it comes out in the quality of the work. The particular company that, the large company that we do inspections for, they had a maintenance regime of about 4 trucks and 24 people working full-time doing maintenance work. After we started down there, we cut that right down to 1 truck and 2 men. It shows up. It shows up. As soon as it's not supervised correctly, it shows up. It shows up over the years.
Okay. So Peter, when you sign a building contract, is that it in the way of costs?
Normally it should be, but you need to be, again, very wary of your contract and have a look at it. The building may not have been approved. Now, it hasn't been approved. It's got to go through the planning process and the building approval process, development planning approval, and with that can be some extras. It depends on where you're building. If you're building in a bushfire area, there are add-ons both planning-wise and building-wise for bushfire provisions, where the windows have got to be different. You've got to sark the roof. You've got to stop sparks and embers from getting into the roof. You've got to have a rainwater tank. You've got to have pumping systems, and that can add a substantial amount to it. And if you're not prepared for it, it can actually stop your building, I guess, because you could be up for $20,000. Footings. A lot of times the builder doesn't know exactly what size footings you've got are going to have for the building until it's been engineered, and his standard footings might not come anywhere near the mark. And I know people who suddenly find themselves facing an extra bill of $11,000 for the extra footing costs, even though there's been standard footings included. Council approval. You might be building in a corrosion zone. A mile back from the beach, you've got a corrosion zone, and the corrosion zones are due to not only salts and sea air, but also in areas, old industrial areas where there's heavy metals on the ground, etc. And heavens forbid you might even get lumbered with contaminated soil, which with most buildings that you buy, that's already been addressed by the developers. But contaminated soils is a very big issue. So there's those sort of costs that can really bite you. Wind loadings. You might be in a W41 or W52 wind loading area. Straight away, your tie downs are different, your windows are different, and that can add thousands of dollars on top of the cost as well. So before you sign on the dotted line, you need to be very much aware of all of those things, because they can actually break the budget and cause a lot of problems. And as I said before, money causes the biggest problem. A lot of disputes that I get involved in, really, when you look at it, come back to there's not enough money in the bin to pay for it.
Mm. So, Peter, how would an owner protect themselves during the building process?
Well, you know, the owner, most owners don't know very much about building, and so that's why they go to a builder. And so you've got the builder on one side who knows all about building, and an owner who doesn't. One of the best ways is to hire an expert, like a consultant or an architect, to check the work during various stages. We do a lot of that. We call it the stage inspections, where we'll come in and have a look and be on site when the footings are poured. We have a look at the wall and roof framing and upper floor if it's a two-storey job, and we have a look at the brickwork. We have a look at all the work before it's covered, and then we have a look at the waterproofing of the wet areas, etc. And then we have a look at the final product as well and give it a tick. It's very important that things are looked at before they're covered over, because once they're covered over, it's always very difficult for even the inspector to see. What's very important with the inspection process is that it's done at the right time, and usually the progress payment time is the best time. The owner pays a progress payment,